welcome Mr. Ian Wallace, who will be our parliamentarian for this afternoon, as well as our legal resource should we need him. And welcome members of the press who are in the audience. Just so I can talk into it. We do have a proposed agenda, so are there any items that should be added to the agenda? Seeing none, sorry, go ahead, Jonathan.
Chair, I'd like to put a motion to the floor that we add an item to strike a governance committee.
Thank you, realizing that that would require unanimous consent. So you were so moving. Seconder, please. Okay, those in favor of the addition of the item that we would, how did you put it, Jennifer? Develop a governance committee. Those in favor, say aye and raise your hands. Or is there anybody opposed? To be a lot easier. No one is opposed. Okay, so we'll put that under new business, 6.8. So 6.8 will be the development of a governance committee. Peter, did you say have something?
Mr. Chair, thank you for recognizing me. I just had a question, and it's regarding an agenda issue that was discussed in the last executive meeting in Section 5. We talk about bringing an issue that was discussed at the executive level to the public board meeting. I didn't see it on the agenda. I was just wondering if that was still the intention.
Which item are you referring to?
FC, there was a discussion just following, I guess, the procedures from the last AGM and some questions there.
Yes, it's our intention to suggest that that be deferred to the closed session when we get there.
Okay, so it's going to be a closed session?
It'll be your choice, but I'm suggesting that's where that will happen. That's a personnel issue.
Okay, so will we discuss that in this meeting, or?
No. Well, it's up to you, of course, but if we defer it to a closed session, we'll discuss it in a closed session of the meeting, yes.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, if it's not on the agenda, when do we intend to make it a deferred issue?
Under the Executive Committee Report, October 25th, item 5.3.
Okay, fair enough.
Other business arising from the agenda? Seeing none, a motion to adopt the now amended agenda is in order. Moved by Ray, second by Lester. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. We have two minutes that have to be approved. The first, of course, is the board meeting of August the 11th. Are there any errors or omissions noted from that meeting? Seeing none, motion to adopt the board meeting minutes of August the 11th. Tom, second John. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. And the AGM minutes, I've been informed we have to adopt those as well. They were in your kit. This is the annual general meeting, of course, of October 21st. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? Seeing none, a motion to adopt the AGM meeting minutes of October 21st is in order. John and Eric, those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. We have no business arising from this end of the table. Is there any business arising from the minutes that any trustee would like to raise? Seeing none, we'll go to committee reports. There are three committee reports from the executive. I will report on these. You have them in your kits from the committee meeting, that is the executive committee meeting of September 21st. There are no motions to be brought forward. I'm sure you speak into this. There are no motions to be brought forward, but there were motions approved on behalf of the board. So in that context, I would ask if there are any questions on the minutes of September 21st. Jennifer?
Chair, just a question about 5.2.
Go ahead.
Just wondering, the budget came to the executive for approval. I'm just wondering why the Finance and Operations Committee didn't meet on that?
My understanding is that the normal procedure was followed, but I really can't answer that. Donnie?
Mr. Hall briefed on the budget, and there was no substantive changes to the briefing that Mr. Hall provided at the meeting of August. Requirement to submit to government. Mr. Hall, do you have anything to add to that?
No, Mr. Stack, that's exactly it. There was no change from what I had presented in the previous meeting to the entire board, and the government was on a timeline and asked were we complete, so I just got the executive to approve the one that was already presented to the.
Thank you, Terry. Any other questions on the meeting of September 21st? Seeing none, a member of the executive committee will please move adoption of these. Lester, second. John, those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. October the 4th, also in your kit, this is the meeting that basically we changed the meeting schedule. There's no motion to bring to the table on that. In fact, the meeting has already happened. So any questions on 5.2, that's the executive meeting October the 4th. Seeing none, someone will move the adoption of that. Lester, John, those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? None. And the third meeting is October 25th, and there is some work from that. The first item deals with the Audit and Risk Committee. And from your kits, the Executive Committee is recommending that the Board approve the establishment of an Audit and Risk Management Committee, whose role is to obtain reasonable assurance that the district has in place an acceptable environment of internal controls and that they're operating effectively. The appointment of this committee will be effective from date of formation, and members will be assigned for a period of 2 years. To get that on the floor, I would ask someone to move that. Doesn't have to be an executive member. Lester, seconded, please. Peter, those in favor? Sorry, no discussion.
I would like to move an amendment to the composition of that committee.
Amendments in order. Go ahead, sir.
Before I do that, I guess I'd just like to speak to the motion just a little bit. I think it's great that we're doing it. We had a great discussion about that, and it's follow-up from the conversations here 2 weeks ago. However, I'm a little uncomfortable with the fact that the committee, as it is spelled out at the moment, we'll have 3 members of the executive committee on it and 2 other members, the finance committee chair and the chair of the other standing committee. I would be more comfortable as a trustee if we had either the president or the vice president. Our bylaws clearly state that the president will be an ex officio member of every committee, and maybe instead of having another member from the executive council, the committee, I think it should be a member from our larger group who's not on either the executive or chair of a committee. I think that would be more reflective of our organization as a whole. If not, we run back into that issue of, the executive committee will have the majority say always, and I think it would be more transparent and more accountable to the public if we reflected the true composition of our entire organization, not just the executive.
Thank you. Did you
So
say
the motion is that the committee consist of the chair or the vice chair, a member from each of the standing committees, and 1 member of one trustee at large.
Okay, so the amendment is clearly in order. Peter has moved the amendment. Did we get a seconder for that? Thank you. Discussion on the amendment. Peter, you've spoken to it. I presume you don't have to say anything else. The floor is open for debate on the amendment. Tom? Is that in the nature of your amendment, Peter, that we're discussing the chair or just the composition?
Well, it is composition, and the chair is part of the composition of the committee. As I said, the chair or the vice chair, whoever is chosen to be in that position. Probably a good idea, and I take it as a friendly amendment, that the group itself select its chair like we do with all other standing committees, as opposed to making an appointment to a certain individual to chair it by right of their position on the board. I'd be more comfortable if we just chose it like we do with the other standing committees. I think that's probably the most fair approach.
Okay, but your amendment deals with the composition of the committee. Okay, so that amendment is duly moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, a vote on the amendment. Sorry.
I have concerns about the composition of the committee. As a trustee who's only been on this elected board for 2 years, I'll say it, blunt. I'm very uncomfortable that we're proposing to have leadership from the board that was in question from 2013 to 2016 lead this committee in an effort to try and straighten out things. I don't think I can support our current chair and vice chair either chairing this committee or maybe even being on the committee, given the report from the Auditor General in the last couple of weeks, and given the fact that she criticized the previous board for the lack of oversight, and I don't think the way forward is to allow the same people who were at the controls then to be at the controls then. That's not anything personal, but I believe we need to make a clear break and a clean break and move forward with a new group.
Nonetheless, Peter has an amendment on the floor, and we're dealing with the amendment now. So are there further discussions on the amendment? Seeing none, the question will be put. Those in favor of the amendment, please indicate aye. Those opposed? Amendment is carried. Now we're to the amended motion. Further discussion on the now amended motion. Seeing none, the question will be put. Those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye. Those opposed? Okay, maybe I'm not being clear. What has happened? We had a proposal from the executive committee, and it was changed by Peter's amendment. So now we have that same thing with Peter's amendment. Are we going to vote in favor of that or not? That's the question.
In other words, are we going to vote in favor of striking a committee based on Peter's recommended composition?
Yes.
Oh, can I just, for a point of clarification?
Pamela?
So if we do not vote in favor of this motion, does that mean that the committee will not be struck?
It does, at least not in this go-round.
Okay.
I would hope that we realize the importance of getting this committee in place as soon as possible. We haven't changed the mandate with the amendment whatsoever. We've just changed the composition of the committee a little more to reflect more engagement from other individuals on the board than we normally have. And so I would really urge members to support the amendment so this committee moves forward.
For the record, the amendment has been passed.
The amended motion,
yes. Yeah. I'll try again. First of all, is there any further discussion? If people are clear, simply had the amendment as presented. Peter amended it. Now we have an amended motion. The question is, are we in favor of it or not? Tom?
What the amended motion is before we vote on it.
Okay, well, we need to get that. Peter, give us the amendment again, please. Thank you. So you've heard the amended motion, Keith?
The amended motion has been read. Can I discuss on the motion right now before the vote?
Well, we haven't had the vote. The floor is open. Go ahead.
I'd just like to reiterate something that Trustee Blunden had said, that it's time for us to have a look at the composition as a whole and, clear the slate, air the laundry, so to speak. The AG report obviously focused on transparency and accountability, so I think that it's time for us to step up to the plate and all of us take a role in that process. And, we're here for a reason. We're here to exact change and not to necessarily accept status quo.
Thank you, Keith. Further speakers to the motion? None? Jennifer?
Just wondering, how are we going to identify the external members that we're going to appoint? We as a board are going to appoint people with legal or financial expertise.
Go ahead. That's a process yet to be determined. I don't know. Further comments, questions, discussion on the now amended motion? Are you ready for the question? You don't look particularly ready, I must say. I'm going to call it anyway.
I'm not sure that everybody is clear, Mr. Chair. There seems like there's a bit of a I don't know around the table there. It seems like what we went through there is a little bit cumbersome.
Let me try this. With the amended motion, Peter has, by Peter's amendment, the composition of the committee will be the chair, vice chair, the chair of the two standing committees, and how many others? Whatever. Two others. That's pretty clear. We either vote in favor of that or we don't.
You've amended chair and vice chair, or chair or vice chair?
That hasn't been amended. Chair or vice chair, if I understand correctly. Yeah.
Just on a point of parliamentary privilege, if there's some confusion with how the motion works, maybe our parliamentarian, Mr. Wallace, could just explain what we've just done. motion that's on the floor is the amended motion, and that's where we stand right now.
Want to give it a try in? Please.
As I understand it, the motion has been amended, and the amended motion would be in respect of the composition of the audit and risk committee, and that is the chair or vice chair of the executive committee, the chair of the two standing committees, the two standing committees, one trustee at large, and I think at the discretion of that committee, an outside appointment for either finance or legal expertise.
I concur, but yeah, you're the parliamentarian, not surely. Thank you. Jennifer?
So it's two external members, is it not? That's what I'm reading.
But that's not none of that has been amended. If that's what's there, that's what's there too.
Right,
Yeah.
and are we having one at-large trustee or two?
I understood that it was two, that we would not have, the chair or the vice chair wouldn't, one or the other would be on the committee, and then there would be the chair of the finance committee and the chair of the other standing committee, and if we're going to have 5 board members on it, the other 2 would come at large.
Clear? Further discussion on the now amended motion? Seeing none, are you ready for the question? You're going to get it anyway. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thanks very much. I didn't mean to be facetious there. It's an important matter.
Thank you.
Second motion from the executive meeting of October 25th. The board approved the draft annual report 2718 is tabled with any significant changes to come back to the board. Someone will so move, please. Looking for a motion to accept that. Lester, John, those for the discussion on that. Very well. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. The third one is a bit tangly, as the presenter said this morning. I think we made a mistake there. That should have been covered in the closed session of the executive committee. Because it is a personnel issue, it should be discussed in the closed session of the board meeting. In that context, I will entertain a motion to defer that part of the report to the closed session of the board meeting this afternoon. Moved by Lester, seconded by John. Any discussion on the propriety of referral?
Yes.
Peter?
Chair, thank you again. I think the discussion that happened in the executive was interesting, and the first time I saw it was when I saw the minutes. However, I don't see this as a personnel issue. It's not an issue of individuals. Nobody's speaking about any particular individual or any individual's action. The intention of the discussion which occurred was we had just come out of an Auditor General's meeting where we were told to look at risk. And we looked at risk, and we've determined that nobody has done anything untoward. Nobody suggested that anything untoward had been done. What we were saying is that it's important in the future that we make sure we close those loopholes. So, it's really up to the group of the whole to have a conversation about what we're going to do. There's a number of us who would like to have that conversation in public since the executive suggested it. And I'd like to follow up on that. Again, I'll reiterate to every member of the board, there is no question of insults or calling into question the character or behavior of any of our staff. The issue is how we do that process, and following the suggestion of the Auditor General to close loopholes that might lead to risk in the future. And that's all. It's just as simple as that. And to make it into a personnel issue is to play politics with the issue, which is something I think we all agree we've got to stop doing around here.
That's incorrect. The issue that is referred to...
Chair, it's not incorrect.
It's incorrect. The issue, I made the motion. The issue was whether we should be naming names and discussing our executive members in emails, not about the process of the Auditor General. That was the issue identified. I'm sorry it is in the open meeting. I would have preferred to have dealt with it in closed. I have a motion now to refer it to closed. We will deal with it thoroughly then.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
For the record, item 5.4, I'd like to clarify what's recorded there as Trustee Burden having said, and I'm Trustee Burden. My comments with that was that the staff shouldn't have been in a position where they had no recourse when it comes to support. We had no outside,
Scott, we're talking about the propriety of referral. Should we refer or should we not? So your comments would have to be on that.
Well, like Peter said, the original motion was to have it in an open meeting. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to clarify what I had said.
You'll get that chance when we discuss it.
I think the public should have an opportunity to know what we're talking about, that's all.
Well, again, there's another issue, of course. Following the closed session, anything that we want to take out of closed session, we can make public. It's not buried forever. It's simply a matter of having a thorough discussion without naming names of people who are just kind of innocent in a drive-by shooting. So we do have a motion on the floor to refer to the closed session. I'd like the discussion to focus on that.
It's a rather dramatic description, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thanks very much.
Mr. Chair,
Overstating, I think.
I'd like to speak to that too. I'm wondering if it was an issue that was of such concern to the executive that they felt that it should be discussed at an executive meeting and then brought back, why the change of heart? I don't see any names named, but I do see a tendency to create an issue where there really wasn't one.
Your name's named in the emails.
So I guess the second part of my question would be that if so going forward, whether we move this to the closed meeting or not, how do we communicate
It's up to us.
if we don't use email?
No, the question is not how do we communicate. The question is it the propriety of referring this item to a closed session so we can discuss it thoroughly?
But I think that this item is based on personal interpretation, that there is a split view, that there was no personal reference and there was no question of integrity. It was a point of information to say exactly what Peter spoke about earlier, is that we talk about the integrity of processes, and that was what was questioned, was the integrity of the process. So I'm not sure why it even came forward. If we talked about it prior to the AGM, so then this surfaces, and it seems to me like it's as I said, it's a difference of perception of the emails, not necessarily what was discussed in the email.
That may well be. However, we have a motion to refer this to closed session, and speaking to the propriety of that, Keith?
Just as a point of order, maybe this has been cleared up by the parliamentarian as well, for the chair to refer to what was mentioned in emails as drive-by shooting, I think it's clouding judgment of people that are voting here. Is this something that should be left on record or not?
I withdraw the remark, Keith, to save the time. Just trying to make a joke. Further comments?
It's a serious matter, Mr. Chair. I don't think it's a joke.
I stand admonished.
And we have lots of time, Mr. Chair.
It's not a matter of time. It's the propriety of referring this item to a closed session. Further speakers to that motion? Very well. The motion has been made that we'll refer the item, that portion of the executive meeting, to a closed session. Those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. I have 8, right? Those against? I have less than 8, against 5, 6. Motion is carried. The item is referred to closed
Can
session.
we do number again, please?
Sure, put your hands up. Yeah, okay. I got 5, 6.
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, let me count again. Those in favor of the motion? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good enough? Well, not everybody voted, possibly. I'm counting the number who voted. The motion's carried. Okay, now to Finance and Operations. Peter?
Mr. Chair, point of order.
Go ahead and state your point of order, please.
What we have here right now is a matter of, well, go ahead, forget it.
Thank you, Scott. We'll go to 5.4, Finance and Operations Report. Mr. Whittle as the chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is my first report in this duty, so please bear with me. But before I do it, I'd like to thank Mr. Tom Kendall, the former trustee Kendall, the former chair of this committee, for the great job he did last year. And I hope I learned a thing or two from him, and as well our staff, particularly Terry Hall, our Finance and Operations Director, who does a great job all the time and keeps us really informed and keeps the meetings organized. Thank you, Terry. The first issue on the report is a review of use of district facilities by teachers. Do I need to get into the actual discussion, or I just move the motion?
You would move the motion and then invite any questions on the report at the end.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the motion is that the board approve the alterations and improvements program fiscal year 2018-2019 list as presented. It's in your package by the Finance and Operations Committee. We'll need a mover and a seconder.
Peter, you can move it as chair.
Okay, I'll move it. Any seconders?
From your committee, preferably. Discussion on the motion. Seeing none, the question will be put. Sorry, go ahead, Mayor.
Am I to understand that basically, after a review of this particular policy, that no changes are to occur, meaning that our employees will not be allowed to use?
I would defer to the chair of Finance and Property, Peter.
That's a good question. I wasn't chair at the time. Tom, we were asked to look at this issue, I think, by the group as a whole. It went back to us, and we reviewed it. And I think the decision at the end of the day, if I remember correctly, was exactly that as challenging as going forth with this particular agenda issue was, that there were liability issues and things that we had to consider in the overall best interest of the district and our own fiduciary responsibilities. And yeah, that's what we were moving forward with.
Okay. Further questions, or further comments on the motion? Peter, Tom?
My understanding, my understanding, Mr. Chair, that in terms of teachers using facilities,
assuming you're directing that to Peter in the committee. Peter?
Yeah, that's right, Tom. I mean, it's not so much paying, but just if you're going to be in there, to have permission to be there, and that all the rules be followed as they would if you were any other member of the public wanting access to facilities outside of hours or recreational use or activities that are not directly part of your employment.
You further turn off your mic if not going to use it. The question, Jennifer, go ahead.
Peter, just so I'm clear, does that mean that we are going to, when you say with the proper permission and following the rules, what does that mean? It's up to the administrator? Because I had quite a bit of concern from within my region that this is, impacting morale and things like that. So are we going to allow our staff to access the building just with strict guidelines?
Jennifer, as you're aware, I brought that issue forward on your behalf because you weren't able to attend the meeting, and we had a good discussion on it, and it's in our notes here. And yeah, I mean, what we're looking at here is district's liability, and the policy would apply to all district staff when it comes to the use of district facilities, materials for personal use, and not just for teachers. And we felt it would be very difficult to restrict only certain employees and not others. So, after our further discussion and consideration of the information that was provided to us by our staff, we made that decision and we're in agreement to keep the policy in place as it was originally passed by the board.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
So I'm not clear, because what is the original policy? That they cannot use the facilities, or that they can use them with stricter guidelines?
For the latter, nobody's saying they can't use the facilities, but it's just not a matter of using the facilities whenever you feel like it or not, running it by the administration and getting permission to do it. Sort of handled locally, I guess, by the administrators. That was not the intention. Not to pay. I mean, what we're talking about is different groups using it for different reasons, right? Lester, you know, the answer to the question is that they would be allowed to do it. They just, you know, would seek permission to do that. It's a murky issue. I don't know if Terry wants to maybe have a word on the liability issues and the reason that we're bringing this forward. But at the end of the day, we are having a discussion now, and our recommendation is clear. If members of the board feel that that's not fair and it's not going to be conducive to good relationships, then you're free to not pass this particular suggestion. But my understanding is that we've been asked to consider this from an operations and finance point of view because of liabilities that we all have to accept, and that's our job. Our fiduciary responsibility is to protect the board.
Couple of things. Just let me clarify that, because how can there be liability issues in a school owned, board-owned building by one of its employees? If you want me to, I can just briefly comment, and
Go ahead, Terry.
our legal can make a comment. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can narrow this down as to why this came back, and if people are misunderstood or think I'm wrong, please, Peter, speak up. This came back because it was a point of the actual fitness rooms and using the fitness equipment. It wasn't necessarily in using the gym like anyone else in the public can fill out a community use form and go in and use our gym for running or something like that. This was a specific issue came back because it got out about using physical equipment, our bikes, our treadmills, our fitness centers that are in schools for the students. And it was being used after hours almost for a personal gym. And that's where the liability comes in, trustee, because if we're not a licensed gym, like a commercial gym, and if they're using this equipment, that is a liability if they get injured, and there's nothing signed, there's nothing, and then it came down to, if we open it up to one particular group of employees, have to open it up to everyone to have fair access to our fitness equipment? That was the issue that came back, as my understanding, that was discussed in terms of use. No one ever said that a teacher or any staff can't go in and fill out a community use and use a gym just like anyone else in the public can. But even the public are not allowed to use our equipment when they use our school. That's written right in the agreements. They're not allowed to use our equipment. I don't know if that clarifies for you, hopefully.
Thank you, Terry. Before I go to Tom, Tony, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, just the item 4.1, the motion on the floor pertains to item 4.2. We've gone back and discussed 4.1 now, just to clarify. The motion is with reference to the alterations, improvements, the fiscal year 2018, 2019. But
Correct.
we went back then to 4.1, just so everybody is clear.
They don't look very clear. Okay, so the motion that we have on the floor, and that much is correct, has to do with alterations and improvements. We are actually talking about the use of school equipment. Let's get that out of the way first, and then we'll get to the motions. Tom, you had a comment? Okay, thank you. But the motion that we actually have on the floor, now that I read it, has to do with alteration and improvement programs. Are we ready to speak to that? Well, let's deal with that one. That's kind of automatic. So someone will move that, please. Actually, Peter will move that. Someone will second it. Please. Okay. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Okay, back to the discussion about the school equipment. Where are we with that? I understand the question. Nothing has happened yet. Hayward?
I find, sitting around this particular table, is that I'm at a loss, I guess, to understand what we're trying to do here. And I'm not at a loss when it comes to the legalities, but sometimes we can use the legal world to allow us not to do anything, and that seems to be what is happening here.
If you're not using your mics, just turn them off, please. We're getting a lot of feedback.
teachers and our support staff are able to avail of, physical activities. And all employers, whether they're in education or elsewhere, have health and wellness plans that often are attached to your employment. And, we do have this facility, and we do have a high sick leave among our employees. And if we can provide a health and wellness program, albeit ad hoc or incidental, I think providing that to our staff is a very worthwhile venture, and I think it also recognizes the important work that they do as volunteers beyond the work that we pay them to do on a daily basis.
Thank you, Hayward. The situation is this: there is no recommendation, there is no motion from the committee. So essentially, there being no motion, the status quo remains. So we are having a discussion about a motion that really doesn't exist as such. So we can do this. I would suggest, though, that if there is no motion from the committee, that you move on, Peter, to your next motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I apologize to anybody who's watching this outside and are confused. The motion was carried, was the motion that the Alterations Improvements Program be approved. The other was part of a discussion that came out of the Finance Committee that we were asked to look at. I just wanted to say that for clarity's sake. Finance and Operations Committee, we discussed the Paradise Intermediate land purchase, and the site is comprised of 2 parcels, which is explained here. The motion that we would like the board to consider is that the board approve the acquisition of parcels of land required for Paradise Intermediate School from Carwood Realty and the Town of Paradise, respectively, as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee, subject, of course, to ministerial approval, and I'd like to move that motion.
Seconder, please. John, motion is moved and seconded. Discussion on the motion? Seeing none, the question will be put. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Carry on, Peter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item of business is a strip of land in Gander. It's a simple land exchange, housekeeping more than anything else. The committee is recommending the board approve the following motion: that the board approve the acquisition of the indicated parcel of land to complete the Gander Academy site as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee, subject to ministerial approval, and I'm moving that.
Seconder, please.
Second.
Wentz, discussion on the motion? Seeing none. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Continue, Peter.
The next issue is easement in Labrador for Eastlink. Members might remember a couple of months ago we looked at a similar situation for another school. Motion that the board approve an easement on the Menahek High School site for use by Eastlink, provided it is at no cost to the district and does not adversely impact the school as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee. I'd like to move that motion.
Duly moved. A seconder, please. Keith, discussion? None. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Carry on, Peter.
The next motion is with regards to bus purchases for the upcoming few years. The committee is recommending the board approve as follows: that the board approve, as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee, A, the purchase of 47 buses at a total cost of $5,584,134 with HST included, and B, borrow up to $6 million with an amortization period of 12 years, with such approval further subject to ministerial approval. So moved.
Seconder, please. Okay, Ray, discussion? None. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Next one, Peter.
Thank you very much. Now we're going to move it into some quick motions on the disposal of some properties. Heritage sale, the former Heritage Academy in Greaves Pond, Newfoundland, was closed in 2016, and it was recently offered for sale by public tender. We received 6 bids. The motion is that the board approve to accept the offer by public tender from Alliance Builders Limited in the amount of $42,000 for the sale of the former Heritage Academy in the community of Greaves Pond, as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee. I so move.
Second.
Duly moved. A seconder, please.
Second.
Wentz, discussion? None. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Carry on, Peter.
Long Island Academy, former Long Island Academy in Luscious Bight, Beaumont, was recently tendered for sale with the closing of September 13th, 2018. When the town was made aware that the tender was issued, they contacted the district and advised a water filtration system for the town is located on that property. So I gather we don't want a repeat of the situation Belle Island found itself in when they were transferring some property with their water infrastructure there. So the motion is that the board provide approval for the district to convey the property to the town for normal consideration as recommended by the Finance and Operations Committee, subject to ministerial approval. I so move.
Thank you, Peter. Seconder. John, discussion? None. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Any other motions, Peter?
No, I don't have any further official motions, just some discussions here on some of the things that we talked about in our last couple of meetings. If anybody has any questions on any of those, I'll certainly entertain any questions.
Any questions on the report of Finance and Operations? Hayward?
One question, and I guess it's how do we go back to the item we were discussing previously to seek some clarification or some movement forward on that? Because if I remember correctly, we referred it back, and now it's come back to us, but we're still discussing it, and it doesn't seem, as I look around the table, that we're quite content with where we are.
Yes, sir. Turn on your mic, Nancy.
Interested in the liability issues, where there is no defined workday for a teacher, or actually for any of the staff in a school, other than what the principal would assign at any given day. The number of hours per week, or the number of hours per month or year, or whatever, would be defined. But the actual workday seldom is, because we've had support staff in on weekends, and we've had teachers in on weekends, so there is no defined workday. I'm just wondering, are employees allowed to use school equipment during a regular workday? And if they are, what's the liability issue, whether it's at 10 o'clock at night or 3 o'clock in the afternoon?
From time to time, I have been consulted on issues related to community use of schools. As Mr. Hall referred to, there is an application, a community use of school form. And within that, individuals, community members, and that could be a scout group or a recreation basketball league, they can apply to the school for use of school property, and there are provisions in those forms for liability insurance. So, Trustee Simmons, I know that's not your question, but there is a process that's been established, and I think within that process, it can be determined what amount, if any, is charged for the use of schools. Coming out of Trustee Whittle's committee discussion, I'm not sure a recognition that teachers should be treated the same as other members of the community necessarily would involve charging a fee to teachers, depending on the Act does prescribe minimum hours for a school day. It doesn't define those hours, but I would think teachers that would return to a school in the evening are outside of the school day. It would not be considered to be discharging their statutory duties. I know from past consultation as well, at times there are teachers that would look to make use of a gymnasium or other school facilities on a for-profit basis. They might be running a league or instructing a class where funds are collected. Discussion at the Finance Committee. But the liability issues, I think, are apparent, both in terms of the equipment. If a teacher, any member of the public, using a piece of equipment owned by the district, sustained injury, there could be a question of liability, and that's amplified, of course, if teachers are bringing students or community members into the school. There are liabilities issues I could identify around the facility, the equipment, and also should there be an incident, an assault or anything, while those individuals are in school premises. So the notion that there would be a process for a teacher to use a school facility would make sense to me. I think that protects the district in terms of insurance. It provides a record of who is using the school property. And I don't think it comes down to a matter of economic or, revenue generation. I think it's within the school or the district's discretion whether, in fact, a particular use would incur a particular charge. But anytime you have individuals in the school, there's a risk, particularly when it's outside the regular school day.
Thank you, Ian. I have Jennifer, then Peter.
So I'm wondering two things. First of all, I'm pretty sure this emerged out of the conflict of interest policy, right? And I would suggest that there is already provisions in the conflict of interest that would deal with use of school property for financial gain. So that should not be a part of this piece. And secondly, employers throughout this province provide access to gym equipment and physical fitness equipment and wellness programs, as Hayward referred, and so it's covered under their general liability insurance. And I'm wondering why we would be any different.
Jennifer, I don't think we're any different. Like I say, the conversation came out of the board meeting when this policy was passed, and we wanted to, a lot of us, including myself, had concerns about restricting teachers from, after-hour usage of facilities in schools. One of the things I said, well, what if you got a new 3D printer and you got to figure it out? You want to go in after hours, you certainly don't have time during the day to do it. And as our legal counsel and our director has indicated to us, there are some issues of usage. Another one that came forward was the idea that the liability for cost of wear and tear and things like that and replacement. These were all the issues that were brought to us. So simply, again, the confusion in the beginning, because I thought there was a motion attached, there is no motion, it's a discussion. So I would suggest if there's concern, let's send it back to the committee and try and address the concerns that are brought forward here. The committee, I think the majority of the committee were the same mind that you're in now at the beginning of the discussion, and after we listened to the legal arguments and the administrative arguments, we felt that we had to do the most responsible thing to protect the district. I'm not particularly enamored with changing things, but as Terry just said, it just closes the loopholes. I don't see it prohibiting teachers from using facilities. That's not the intent.
Thank you, Peter. Lester, and then Keith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to Trustee Blake's remarks earlier, the fact that on one hand, we look for a lot of goodwill from our staff in terms of coaching and going to dances and supervising kids on their own time after school. We do that on one hand, and on the other hand, we are penalizing them, saying, well, that's fine, but you are not allowed to use our facilities. I think that's very regressive, and I just want to go on the record as saying that.
Thank you, Lester. Keith?
Just listening to what Terry and Ian had said earlier, I know first, Terry, you had mentioned that this was brought to your attention based on gym equipment use, and that's how it kind of came on the radar. Am I correct in saying that? Fitness center, right. And I can totally understand why you wouldn't want someone to create their own fitness center and for whatever reason, especially from a liability perspective. But I think in the discussion paper that I had seen, there was reference to facilities in general, and that kind of seems too broad, too big of a brush, and it kind of says, everything within the school, every facility should not be able to be used, not just referring to the gym equipment. And I'm not comfortable with that. And number two, with regards to Ian's reference to liability, just to be clear to the trustees that I've been asked several times by a couple of organizations to look deeper into this, and I'm sure our senior staff will probably echo what I'm about to say or clarify it if I'm wrong, is that there's an existing CGL policy in place for the 10 months of the school year. Am I correct? So if there's an outside group, they don't need their own insurance company. As long as it corresponds with the September to June of a school year. Is that correct, Mr. Stack?
Not really sure of the question.
If there's an outside group wants to bring in an activity and do so, say, for karate for September to June, they don't need to carry their own liability insurance unless it's from July and August when school is not in session. Is that correct?
Oh, no, they need their own liability.
Okay, because I'm looking, I think we better have another look, because based on my interpretation and what I've been told is that if it's from September to June, then the CGL of the school would cover any, as long as it's it's approved by the administration of the school. So that's incorrect?
I'm not aware of a commercial general liability policy. And in fact, I think the policy of insurance that applies to the district is in place by government, not by the district. I don't think the district has separate coverage, and I've not heard of coverage available only for an academic year. So under the forms that are prescribed, users have to provide their own insurance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Go ahead, Hayward.
I guess by way of a final comment on this, I think this was a policy that this board adopted, and then the policy was applied, and we found that it's certainly not probably working for our staff, teaching and non-teaching, and I guess as the Auditor General said, we need to look at our policies and to see how they're working. And I think this is a policy that certainly many of us around the table feel its application as an unintended consequence. And if it's in order, I'd like to move that we revisit this policy to, I guess, to find a way to be able to allow our staff to be able to use our facilities with whatever controls need to be put in place.
Would you refer that to the committee? Is that
Absolutely.
when you say, okay, so you mean refer to the Finance and Property Committee? Peter has seconded that. Any discussion on that motion?
I think that's the appropriate thing to do. This could be a case of trying to follow the letter of the law and defeating the spirit of the law. I would agree with Lester. I remember when this motion was passed originally, I did vote against it. Now I'm chair of the committee, and I'm just explaining what the discussion was when we went over it. So I'd gladly like to take it back and have another review. However, I think it's cognizant on all of us to realize as we try and find a fix to this problem or this challenge and this issue, and this in no mean is a mean-spirited approach to denying a group of our employees access. This is purely within looking at risk and that sort of thing. So I just want to make sure that's clear, and if you agree to support this motion, I look forward to making it the first issue on the agenda for first Finance and Operations meeting as chair.
No further speakers to the motion. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Peter, to conclude your report, you'll move the adoption of both of your reports, please.
Yes, I'd like to move for the adoption of both reports.
Seconder, Tom. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Thank you. Thank you for a very thorough report, Peter.
Thank you.
The next item is the Programs and Human Resources Committee report to Kevin.
Mr. Chair, the Program and Human Resources Committee met on October 25th. One of the outcomes of that meeting was to review the refusal of school admission policy. By way of background, in the past year, the district has been made aware of a number of alleged sexual assaults where the victim or victims and alleged perpetrator or perpetrators are students of the same school. These situations are complex, and that all students involved have the right to an education, and the district has a responsibility to provide a safe and caring learning environment. Legislation to change the Schools Act to ensure a safe learning environment in our more than 250 schools was passed in the House during the spring sitting. This amendment, Section 35, provides the CEO, Director of Education, with the legal authority to refuse school admission to a student where the district is of the opinion that the presence of the student in the school is detrimental to the physical or mental well-being of students or staff. The amendment provided the authority for removal, but did not provide the process to be followed. The refusal of school admission policy outlines the steps the CEO must follow in exercising authority under the Act, the criteria that the CEO shall use to inform a decision to exercise that authority under the Act, the obligation to provide alternate delivery of an educational program, the expectation that the CEO, Director of Education, is to review his or her decision at least every 15 days and determine whether or not the student should be readmitted to the school. Committee members were supplied with a draft of that policy, to which we made certain revisions. This revised policy and administrative regulations are listed in your document package as items 5.6, 5.6A, and 5.6B. A motion to recommend this policy to the board was carried unanimously. I thereby move that the refusal of school admission policy and accompanying administrative regulations as presented be adopted by the board.
Thank you, Kevin. A seconder, please. John, discussion on the motion? Seeing no discussion, the question will be called. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. Continue, Kevin.
The only other item of note was our work plan, and that's being developed as we speak, and there are at least 10 or 12 new items coming up this year. It will be a very robust year for programs and human resources. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Kevin. Any questions on the report of the Programs and Human Resources Committee? Seeing none, Kevin, please move the adoption of your report.
So moved.
Thank you. A seconder? Pamela. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? The report is adopted. Okay, that takes care of the committee reports. We have a number of substantial items still, beginning with 6.1, which is the board action plan on the Auditor General report. Who's taking the lead on that, Tony, you or Terry?
So, thank you, Mr. Chair, and compliments to our Chief Financial Officer, Mr. Hall, for compiling this very quickly. A lot of thought went into it, a lot of energy, and what we believe here is a measured and responsible ask that will be submitted with your endorsement, if it should be that way, to government for the resources associated with a budget request. And I'll turn things over to Mr. Hall for any amplification.
Thank you, Mr. Stack. No, I don't have anything more to add. You know, as an executive, we did discuss this. I thank you for your comments, but we did discuss this and decide that this is serious to us. We take it very seriously. We want to make the change. We have made some change, as I noted a couple of weeks ago when we were together, within the limits that we have in place today. However, for us to do the heavy lifting and take this to where we need to and move the district along, it will take an investment, and that investment is in a fully integrated financial system as a starting point, and then from there we can branch out to all of the other items we need in terms of FTEs to drive processes and get at some more of the stuff that we need to do to move along. So we did look at this from, as Mr. Stack said, a very measured point of view. You know, I started with a clean slate and built up as to what do we need to make an impact and be able to move the yardstick along here in the next few years, but being realistic as well. So that's what the package you had before you attempts to do that.
Thank you, Terry. We'll invite any comments on the reports. Peter?
I just have a question. I'm assuming that this means that we're going to move forward the action plan that's been drafted to the Minister of Education and a request for funding to put this new system in place?
That is what we're tabling today for your endorsement to actually do this request to implement this action plan with the required budgetary ask in order to do it, to go up to the Department of Education. That's correct.
Is it possible for us to meet the recommendations of the Auditor General without making this investment? We don't have the resources to do it ourselves.
some of the biggest issues in the AG's report was the deficiencies in our current financial management system. So there's really nothing based on our system that we can do more. It's basically at its limits. It doesn't have functionality in it that we need in order to do a lot of preventative controls up front. So I'll be honest, I won't say it's impossible, but if we have to do any more very manual processes to be watching everything as it's coming through, we will need a lot of people if we don't get the appropriate fully integrated system. So that's our starting point.
Even a lot of people, it's going to be more.
Even a lot of people with the new system we will need in order to advance down the road on this. But without a new fully integrated system, it'll be that much more difficult.
So on a point of clarification, have we requested in the past that government provide us with resources to put the type of protections in place that we need to protect public tax dollars and decisions that are made? And has government ever responded to us on these things? I know that there was a period in time, maybe a number of years, we were looking for a program to help us with asset control. I know the frustration the board has had, and is that moving forward, at least at this point in time?
We are moving a few things forward. To your question, inventory control and asset management, to your point, and as the report even said, it's not a new issue. It's been a struggle for districts for a number of years, and we try to make advancement where we can. And to your other question, we have asked for resources in the past. And due to a number of initiatives and a number of other items going on, we haven't been able to get at the funding yet to be able to advance a new system or anything. But we're at a point where it is critical and we need to do something.
So if our ask is not improved, we don't really have the resources to move forward. Have we considered any alternative, like maybe a private-public partnership to ensure that these audits that this is done properly? I just get concerned knowing that government's financial position is not great, and we've been robbing Peter to pay Paul in this outfit for a long time, and that responsibility falls us on an organization, and as us as trustees, we're supposed to be protecting the public purse here. How can we protect the public purse if the government's not going to give us money to do it?
Well, first of all, what I'll say is, every day when the district staff go in, they try and protect the public purse as best they can. And I think, I'll be very honest with you, the team took this very seriously when this report came out and took it to heart. And, because they are doing their best and they are protecting, the interests and the assets and safeguarding the stuff of the district. With bottom line, did we look at other solutions? There are other possibilities in terms of what you said. However, we think the best course of action and why we're putting it forward and the way that we think we can attack this and do the best job to safeguard go forward is to go after a fully integrated financial system to put in our own district rather than partnering at this point, because we then get to control and build our own processes around it.
Thank you, Terry. I have last then Tom. Okay, Tom.
I just have a quick question to Terry. I'm just wondering, what is the total budget on this request?
There's a couple of pieces to this. We would need some one-time injection in order to do an upgrade of our system, which gives us the built-in functionality that we're lacking today. And then there would be an initial 2 years that we need an injection to do implementation, because an undertaking of this nature, we need extra staff in order to do implementation. So for the first couple of years with the one-time injection plus the implementation, we're asking for about $2 to $2.2 million a year for the next two or 2.5 years. And then after that, with the staff we need in order to do what we need to do, it'll be a consistent annual budgetary ask of about 1.3 after the third year. So about 2 to 2.1 for the first 2 or 2.5 years, and then 1.3 after that as a steady for the staff that we'll need.
Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Jennifer?
Terry, so this is a critical piece. This is probably the most critical piece, we all agree on. But we talked about the action plan. There was a number of items there. So is this the first of a number of things that we have to, in terms of acquisition of software or new resources? Is this a first of subsequent asks, or?
Well, you know, it's no secret, the heavy lifting is ahead of us. I mean, we've done some stuff, but we've only just gotten off the starting line, as I said, with, you know, with what we're doing the last 18 or 20 months. I can envision this as, you know, if we can get this and in place in the next couple of years, it'll take care of most of our concerns, because some of the other stuff we're doing, as an example, completing our risk management program, you know, adding on the fraud risk management program that we're going to add to it. That'll be done within our current resources we have with respect to our internal audit and those folks. So, you know, there is other things we'll be doing that will help us advance. But I'm certain, yes, after we get a new system and we get it implemented and get things working, there'll probably be some more ask in 2 or 3 years' time on top of what we're asking today. Won't be as substantial, but I'm certain, like the way I articulate this and the way I have to the staff is, this is the new world. This is evolving, and you know, things change all the time. So what we do today, in 3 years' time, we'll need to react and do something different. We'll have to keep up with how, you know, how we're progressing as a district, and change in legislation and those things. We'll be constantly evolving now going forward. So it may, yes, generate some more ask, Jennifer, to your point. Correct.
Thank you. There is a motion to be tabled. However, if there's any more general discussion, we certainly would not truncate that, given the importance of the issue. Okay, the motion is that the board approve the proposed action plan and associated budget request while there is presented, and direct district staff to further prepare a formal request to the provincial government regarding the administrative and operation resource requirements needed to succeed in implementation and mitigate operational risks. Someone will please move. Jennifer, seconded. John. And any in discussion on a particular motion? The motion is to approve the action plan. Seeing none? Okay, those in favor of the motion, aye. Those opposed, the motion is carried. Thank you. 6.2 is the school review of the mobile central high school system. Is Ed doing the lead on that? Jennifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't beleaguer it. We've been talking about the mobile central high school system for 2 years. So at the April meeting, board meeting, there was a motion put forward. There was 2 motions. The first one was that we would remove the grade 6s from St. Bernard's effective at the end of the construction of the extension, and that passed. The second motion was that we would complete a school review to determine whether it would be beneficial to move the grade 5s from St. Bernard's Elementary to Mobile Central High School to alleviate further enrollment pressures. We're now starting the school review process for that. Ed has prepared some data that is in your package. I will ask each of you to review it, but a couple of side notes that I want to add to it. Just to let you know, it's not captured in here, but today, or Monday, there are 378 children at St. Bernard's Elementary. We are taking 64 of them out once the extension is complete. The impact has been tremendous. There is no library this year. We are co-teaching a class of kindergartens. We also have a combined grade. I could just go on and on about the impact of the space issues. And the most recent one is, this year the children could not have a Halloween celebration because there is no room for the children to move around the school. So this is a critical issue, and while it's not the one that the parents in the region would have preferred, or I, as the representative, would have preferred, we have to work best with what we have. So I will say to you that while the data that you're being presented with suggests that we could potentially leave the grade 5s at St. Bernard's until 2025, saying we have enough classrooms, that is open to interpretation. And if your child was in that building, you might feel differently. And I would suggest to you that the basis of this review is that we need to move that grade level sooner rather than later. Of course, pending the outcome of the school review process and public consultation, but that, you know, when you review this and you look at the numbers, it's not capturing current year, and we all know how projection systems work. So just give some weighted value to the fact that this decision needs to happen this year, not in 2025.
Thank you, Jennifer. Further comments on that item? Seeing none, we will move on. 6.3, Newfoundland and Labrador School Board Association report. There is no report, nor is there a report from the Newfoundland School Milk Foundation. The Education Foundation report, that last meeting was in August, at which time we approved the list of scholarship recipients. That committee, of course, meets when it is necessary, so it would not have regular meetings or particular times during the year when it meets. However, to follow procedure, I would entertain a motion that the report from the Education Foundation Committee be accepted. Someone will so move, please. Yes, no? Okay, Hayward and Kevin. Thank you. Those in favor? Aye. Those opposed? Motion is carried. There is no report from the NLISE, and it brings us to item 6.7, the bylaw discussion on term limits for the Executive Committee. Scott, that was yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposal for the bylaw amendment, or the new bylaw that would impose term limits on those who serve in the Executive Committee, I think is born out of a lot of frustration over the last couple of years. And the willingness of the majority of our table to just accept the status quo. We've got tremendous talent around this table. We've got 17 individuals who've got varied work experience, professional experience, and so much that they can contribute. And quite often that's all stymied and stifled because they can't advance into leadership positions at our board. And I think we can fix that. I think we can depoliticize this table. And I think that we can do something that's progressive. My proposal would be that we limit the amount of time that trustees can serve on our Executive Committee to 2 years, and after that they would rotate off. And it does a couple of things. It rejuvenates and refreshes all the time, and you've got new blood. And it brings a different perspective, and it changes things up a little bit, and uses or utilizes more the people that we have around our table. And I think there's frustration because we haven't done that. Having said that, I would move that we would refer to our newly minted ad hoc committee going to review the bylaws, the concept of introducing term limits on our Executive Committee.
Thank you. There's a motion that we refer the item of term limits to the Committee on Bylaws. A seconder would be required. John is seconding. To the motion. Any speakers to the motion? Peter?
Mr. Chair, yeah, I think it's a great motion, Scott. It's something worth consideration, and we'll have a look at it on that basis. I just had a question that's tied to this, and this is this bylaw committee. I know we're having a discussion about the bylaws tomorrow. That's going to be facilitated by the Gardner group. Is the committee that has been struck for the bylaws, there's been a fair amount of discussion that it's an unworkable committee. It's pretty much a committee of the whole. Is the purpose tomorrow to, excuse the pun, whittle that down so it's a working group? And are we gonna be able to put a committee in place that has the same structure as our other ad hoc committees so that it can function and bring recommendations forward? My concern when, as you know, I've been chasing everybody around for a governance and a bylaws committee since my first meeting 2 years ago. My concern is that it's just an unwieldy way to get the solutions that we need, and I think Trustee Gill spoke to that in an email that was quite well received by all of us and made a lot of sense. So I'm just wondering, at what table will we decide the composition of a functioning bylaw committee as opposed to an unfunctional or a dysfunctional one that is just too big to work?
If the question is directed to me, it will not be tomorrow morning. That is a Gardner Institute presentation on bylaws in general. It is not a committee meeting. I'm not quite sure what else you want me to say here.
Okay, I'm a little confused, Chair, and, you know, I get confused easily. My concern is that I thought coming in to this weekend, after, you know, some of the confusion on the bylaw committee, particularly the last annual general meeting, when there were some issues we had hoped to resolve before we had that election, we didn't have the opportunity to do so, that we were going to have a bylaws committee meeting this weekend. Now I'm a little confused that we're not. I thought maybe the Gardner Institute was going to facilitate our discussion, but it's going to be an information session tomorrow. We're not going to determine what we're doing with the bylaw committee. I'm not sure that's quite what the board wanted with regards to the bylaw committee. I don't know, I could be wrong, but I'd certainly like to hear what other people have to say about that at the table.
Just to make sure that I was clear when I spoke, while the presentation is by the Gardner Committee, there's absolutely no reason why we couldn't discuss the composition of the committee. We can do that. Yeah.
Okay, I
Jennifer?
just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Jennifer?
So when is the bylaw committee going to be officially struck and active and meet and start their work? Because this has been a discussion point for 2
Well,
years.
the struck part has been done. There's
Right,
no...
but we have had discussion in email that it perhaps is too onerous, that we might, so are we making a decision on that, or, like, is everybody on the committee?
Right now, with the exception of one, I believe that person has joined, but you know, for what it's worth, I would agree with you 100%. It's far too cumbersome. We need a smaller committee, and we need to somehow break it down.
Well, I think we need an action item then, because if not, we have to wait for 3 months before it comes back to the board again. And at that point in time, we'll have 3 months where there will be no work completed.
Mm-hmm.
So is a motion in order then on the composition of the bylaw committee? You know, how we want to go about it as an ad hoc committee? Is that something that we need to figure out? I mean, personally, no real insult intended to anybody, but you know, I felt the fact that you put that everybody was put on this committee was a great way to make sure it never moved forward. So I'd like to propose a motion that the board strike a new ad hoc bylaw committee with following the same composition of other standing committees of the board. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, okay, go ahead. I'm not sure I followed, but go ahead, Leslie.
Just a point of clarification. Tomorrow we are having a session on bylaws.
Bylaws, yes.
Would it be out of order that we, based on what comes out of that presentation tomorrow, that we decide on the composition of the committee tomorrow and then form the committee tomorrow?
Well, I guess we'll have to decide that, but
Yeah,
right now, the committee we have is to take a motion to change it. We're
Yeah.
going to a study session tomorrow, so it's not an official meeting of the board or even an unofficial meeting of the board. So I think we'd have to, while we're talking about composition here now, we're not talking about disband date or anything else.
I agree that having everybody on a committee is counterproductive, and that, you know, if we're gonna do this right, we need to do it right, and have a proper committee struck and formed. And I think probably the best time to do it would be right once we've had a presentation on bylaws by an expert.
Just a point of clarification, Chair.
Yes.
Are we able to make a decision like that as not being together as a board?
No.
Right.
That's why I brought it forward now, and it doesn't impact our discussion tomorrow. But what it does do is ensure the framework is in place so this committee can actually start doing the work that the board would like it to do. If not, we're going to have to wait till our next meeting, which is 3 months away.
Just on that note too, like, I'm recalling one of the things I said this morning, like, we can have discussions about items and then they go to committee. It doesn't have to wait until it comes back to have a debate on it. And I think a lot of times that's more productive, and this being a perfect example of that. So I would suggest that we move forward now with, you know, identifying who is on the committee, and then we have an open, frank discussion tomorrow where everybody gets to contribute, and then the committee is tasked with moving forward.
Well, two things. First of all, to the composition of the current committee, everyone who was on it asked to be on it. No one was put on the committee, so 16 people asked. No, I was talking to Peter's comment there. The only problem was, Jennifer, is the process of doing it. How could we do it here and now? Who would do it? This group?
What do you mean?
Yeah,
Vote to say who was on it?
Construct
Well,
a
I
new
mean,
committee. Yeah, well, that too.
you know, so very rarely do we end up, I suppose, with everybody wanting to be on a committee. I guess that speaks to the importance of reviewing the bylaws. You know, and we all have different points that are important to us, but Scott, I want to officially lend my support to your point that I do think term limits is a critical piece of that. But, you know, if it comes down to drawing the names out of a hat, well, how else are you going to do it? I don't know, when you got 17 people who want to be a part of a board, or a committee, sorry, but we have to do something. Otherwise, we're just treading water now for another few months.
Well, someone has to make a decision. I mean, you can refer it to, I'm just thinking out loud, which is dangerous. You could refer it to the executive to pick 7 people and ask them if they want to serve or something like that. What are you interested in? I don't...
Just maybe there's a change of heart with some individuals here after the conversation, that they know that their voices are going to be heard either way, that we could cut the amount of people interested in this committee in half just by a show of hands. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's something we should try.
Well, as it currently stands, the committee is constituted. What you're suggesting is we change the makeup of the committee, increase the number.
What I'm suggesting is right now, of course, as Peter and Jennifer have alluded to, is that we've got an unwieldy number.
True.
So perhaps with everyone knowing that if we were to do a show of hands, maybe you'd have some volunteers back off, knowing their voices are going to be well heard by other members.
Well, Mr. Chair, what I would suggest is we entertain the motion first, and then after that, we could decide on who would sit on that particular committee. When we were asked of our names, if we were interested in participating, I didn't take that as any different than any other committee we're asked to sit on, and then I receive an email telling me, you know, you expressed an interest in finance, you're on finance, but I've been on other committees that, you know, you do the heavy lifting wherever you're asked to do it. So I guess it just really is schematics, but my concern remains the same, that if we don't move on it today, you know, it'll be another 3 months before we make a decision, and I don't think that's where the majority...
The only problem is there is no motion.
Mr. Chair.
I think I put a motion to the floor, and it was
Mr.
duly
Chair.
seconded by
Mr. Chair.
Trustee Gill.
Point of order, please. There's a motion on the floor right now.
No.
Yes, there is.
Which is it?
It is to term limits for the sake of committee.
No.
Did you move it, Scott?
I did, yeah. I moved that the discussion about term limits.
Yeah, we're not talking about that. We're talking about the composition of the committee.
Yeah, I think
We've already done
composition.
that and moved past it.
Yeah.
No, we haven't. The committee still stands as it is. There's no motion referring to the specific size of the committee.
I'll put forward a motion.
Sure.
Motion for us
Oh,
to...
excuse me, on a point of order, Mr. Speaker. I did say that. I said that in the motion that I made, I said that we would strike a new committee, and the composition would be similar to our other standing committees. So that's not a committee of the whole. That sort of speaks to the size. Now, if you want to talk about having a smaller or whatever, but that's the motion that's on the floor for discussion here. If somebody wants to make an amendment to change it,
I'm with you. If you're talking about the normal committees, they're normally decided by the executive, and is that the process you're referring to? Peter? Who's being asked to do what?
Well, all I'm asking is that the committee the composition be suitable for us to actually have it function and make recommendations, and we've already got a number of committees that are in place that have a chair and trustees on it, and we don't have every trustee here on the finance committee. Every trustee here is not on the personnel committee, so I'm having trouble understanding why we can't understand what we're trying to do here today. Clearly put, we want a committee that can work, that has the numbers on it that will work, and I guess we can ask people here what the composition would be, and we could even do that after this motion is passed.
Okay, so just for clarification, the motion is that the committee be reconstituted. Is that clear? But there's no numbers. You haven't got anything specific there.
What's the number on the finance committee right now?
Half. It's 8 or 9 or 7 or 8, something like that.
So we could say no greater than 5 or 7, whatever the consensus is of the group.
Okay, fine. And you had a second.
And the group itself would decide who its chair is.
Okay,
Very adamant about that.
Sorry, let's take that as an amendment, that the number was included in the original one. We'll take that. The problem you're still going to have, who's going to do it?
We'll
That's what
see now in a
we
few
said
minutes who's
we'd
gonna
have a
do it.
show of hands, did we not? I don't know.
Okay, well, let's deal with the first motion. The motion you have is that the committee be reconstituted to a number, did you say 7?
I say no greater than 7,
Okay, and somebody second that, I take?
and the chair to be chosen by the group.
Okay, fine. I think we're clear on that part of it. So the question will be put. Those in favor, aye. Those opposed? Okay, we have that. Now, if we're following the normal procedure, the committees would be struck in the same way all committees are struck. That is by the executive. Is that where we're going? Well, that's as far as the motion goes, right?
Yeah, that's as far as the motion goes, but I think we're having a discussion here now. That's something that we can discuss now. If the executive committee wants to do that, I'm willing to go whichever way the board would like to go, and I think trustees themselves need to make that decision. You can do it here now.
Pamela?
I am perfectly happy to resign from the bylaws committee. So whoever wants to follow suit, we might whittle it down right now.
And I'll resign as well.
Which is what I suggested 10 minutes ago.
Very good. So we seem to have massive resignation here.
Right, you know.
Okay, so
Once we get to
Absolutely.
7 remaining, no one else is allowed to quit.
yeah, I'm not sure this. So you've got 2 or 3 people who would voluntarily resign.
Yes, show of hands.
Volunteer to do what? Resign? All right, sure, I don't care. Apparently, a show of hands, those who Pamela, Keith, Eric, and Peter, and jeez. All right. I'm asking for people to resign. We're going to resign now, not serve on the committee, right? Okay, so how many does that leave? How many resign? Jennifer, Peter, Eric?
I'm gonna put up my 2 hands because I might want.
I got you, Scott, Lester. Okay, so all these people are voluntarily resigning. I have no problem with this, by the way. And now we have a smaller committee. So the only problem they're going to have is going to get to meet. I don't know when that's going to happen. I just don't know when it's going to happen. Okay, fine. Done and done. Go ahead, Jennifer.
We put a motion to the floor that committee meets at the end of the public meeting today and identifies a chair so that they can move forward with a schedule.
Just a point of order first. I think Peter had said no greater than 7. If my math is correct, we're still greater than 7. Am I right?
How many people are now left on the committee? Just raise your hands so we get a number. Oh, it's me. Yeah.
You'll have to resign, Wayne.
No problem.
Need a resigner?
I'll resign. No problem. Make it work. I'm done. Lots to do. Okay, so the suggestion was, now do remember that when we finish the public meeting, we have a closed session. So I don't know how practical that's going to be, but fine by me.
Well, you can wait until, you can either do it in the closed session or do it after the closed session. I mean.
No, I'm saying the closed session would not include the committee.
So you can do it after the closed session. It'll
Okay.
only take, as Pamela said, it'll only take 2 minutes for them to identify a chair. Then at least they can move forward with the schedule.
Consensus?
Yeah,
Fine. No more argument? Good?
Ray
Done,
wants
done.
to speak.
Oh,
I
sorry, Ray.
have one little comment here. How many people are still on the committee that you counted?
I didn't do the count, but I was told it was 7.
And isn't Mr. Price also on there automatically as chair?
Yes, not as chair, but yes, he's automatically
So that's
touching.
8. We need one more to resign.
Yeah, but he's ex officio. I don't think that's going to make a difference, Ray, but it's a good point. Yeah. You can sort that out among yourselves after the meeting.
Yeah, Ray will sort it out. I don't think we want to go through amending the motion again. We'll be here for breakfast.
Okay, so that committee can meet right after the closed session. The last, go ahead, Jennifer.
Your motion did not, it just kind of got dropped, right?
No, it's passed.
That's what I mean, like it never proceeded. We never had a second or a vote?
I didn't vote on it.
No, I didn't think so either.
I didn't know.
I thought we voted.
Did we not vote to refer your suggestion to the committee?
I don't recall voting.
I thought we did.
We did. Okay. The committee is,
Compared to the rest of the stuff.
yeah, pay attention. The committee is the same committee as it was, except for the people who resigned. And Scott's motion to refer is still in effect, so that goes to your committee. It was passed, yes, we did. We having collective amnesia here or something? Any other comments on that? Very well. Item 6.8 is the governance committee. Jennifer, that was you, was it?
So following our meeting, our working session this morning, which I thought was quite productive and very engaging, and I have a lot of positives that I took away. Of course, one of the things that came out of it for me was that a governance committee is a good way forward. So that's why I suggested it here today, and I think that it would, we've talked at length about frustration and changing in the guard and term limits and bylaws and how we all contribute and what we contribute. And I do think that a governance committee is a really good vehicle for us as a board to move forward and contribute to reflection of what we are doing and our successes and failures, I guess. So on that note, I will put a motion to the floor to strike a governance committee to be comprised of not more than 7 trustees. And I guess the terms of reference to be developed based on contributions from board members, but primarily our mandate would be to review our performance, our concerns, our how we are operating as a board.
Okay, the motion is duly moved and seconded that we strike a governance committee with the conditions that Jennifer mentioned. The discussion on the motion? John?
A point of clarification, Mr. Chair, is this an ad hoc committee of the board, or would this be a standing committee of the board?
It's an ad hoc committee.
And whether or not would that striking or adding a committee impact our current bylaws and constitution?
Ad hoc committees can be struck for specific purposes.
Okay.
Chair,
Go ahead, Jim.
I suggest that everyone who resigned from the other committee be on this committee.
Well, first, I think where we are with it is that we're being asked to consider having a governance committee. So let's get that out of the way, and then the rest of it will follow. So any further discussion on the motion to strike an ad hoc committee on governance? Seeing none, those in favor? Aye. And those opposed, the motion is carried. Now, that really doesn't move things along very far, because the composition of the committee has to be decided, the process of decision, and so on. You can leave it there if you wish and refer it to somebody else, or you can deal with it now.
Let's do it now. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make another motion, and
Go
this
ahead.
one would be that we will determine the composition of the committee now, and that committee will then appoint their own chair from within their membership.
Duly moved. Second. Okay, and say Hayward if you don't mind. Those in favor? Aye. And those opposed. So we need a process by which to do that. Okay. Jennifer suggested that if you wish to be on the governance committee, show your hands. You got, okay, can we note Jennifer, Peter, Pamela, Scott, Keith, how many is that, 5? And Lester, is that enough? Yep. Okay. We will accept these people then on the committee, and when we're really getting backed up with committees here, but nonetheless.
We're going to have to strike a committee to deal with that.
Chances are. Okay, we've got one committee that's, go ahead, Ian.
Mr. Chair, just to remind the board that under the bylaws, ad hoc committees should be for a maximum term of 12 months, unless otherwise moved by the board. So you might, as part of the terms of reference, turn your mind to whether this committee is being struck for 12 months only, or would have a mandate beyond that. But there should be a fixed term to any ad hoc committee.
You're quite correct. The ad hoc committee is for 12 months. The only way to get a permanent committee would be to change the bylaws. We haven't done that. Hayward, sorry.
I guess the obvious question takes us back to the bylaws committee. So is it 12 months from today or 12 months from the first?
If you ask me, I'd say 12 months from today, but you can, that's a matter of record, whatever it says. And, yeah. So the only thing before I leave that for the governance committee is, was there any intention of meeting prior to dismissal? So after the closed meeting? Very good. We can do that. Anything else on that or any other item before we go to correspondence? We have quite a bit of correspondence. It's been circulated to you. I don't know if there's any comments or questions on either the correspondence that we've received or the correspondence that was sent out. Is there any? Seeing none, we will go to the director's report, and following that, we'll go to closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I have my mic activated. Okay. All right, the director's report. Thank you again, Mr. Chair. And this is focused primarily on programs, which is, of course, our bread and butter and why we all are here in this room, students of the province. It's always good to reflect on our values and our mission statement. But students first is first and foremost. And to that end, we are constantly reviewing, as a staff, how to better prepare students going forward. Now, research shows that if we focus on the learning versus the teaching, that this is the way forward. And recently I attended a session with my colleagues virtually across Canada in something called the C21 network, which is sponsored by Education Canada. And they are of the same mind, that in today's world we need to prepare critical thinkers, collaborators, communicators, and creators. And we start there by ensuring competency in the early grades. And in particular, we focus in our strategic plan on literacy and numeracy. And we need to meet students where they are in the digital world. We know we have the capacity, due to the prevalence of devices that are out in our classrooms. And if students do not have access to devices, we can provide them, either be Chromebooks or tablets. And we've also got some unanimity across the country with respect to where we need to go along the lines of deep learning. Now, within the district, we've got a number of drivers that support this. Of course, we have our strategic plan, which you all have an integral role to play in approving and informing. And again, that strategic plan emphasizes the core competencies. In terms of recently the Premier's task force on improving educational outcomes, the task force largely represented what you as a Board of Trustees told them. And that's what was emanated from the report. Full implementation, the actual education action plan, has a lot of potential for us. We've seen the initial stages of that with our Phase 1 schools, with the infusion of various resources. And in the future, the next step on the horizon is an integrated service delivery model where we bring in justice and health and the other government agencies to support that. So this is all good, positive stuff. As well, we have some enablers. So we have the Center for Distance Learning and Innovation, something that the district took over a year ago. And we have had a lot of dealings with CDLI, focusing on the I in innovation. And we believe that this also offers us potential to expand course offerings, expand how we deliver these programs, and in particular as well, also use it as a professional learning platform for all staff. In terms of outreach, just two examples. Office of Child Youth Advocate, who we interface with a lot. We're collaborating extensively with them on matters of attendance, for example. Another good example of an outreach is the Brilliant Labs, which I'll speak more to as we go through here. In terms of the department, we know that the task force and the Education Action Plan talked a lot about the core competencies, and within the mandated report, it's a good springboard to future action. But one thing we've been in constant dialogue with as a district is around the intermediate curriculum as well as the high school curriculum in terms of modernizing those two. So, where do we want to be? We want every child reading at grade level. Where is our focus? Our focus is initially in the primary grades, particularly up to grade 3. We want a service delivery model that is focused on strength as opposed to deficits. And again, if we get this integrated service delivery model, we'll get support from other government departments as well as other agencies. We want program delivery from multiple platforms, be they virtual, face-to-face, asynchronous, as well enhanced professional learning opportunities, more variety in programming, and ultimately, we think that the vehicle to do this is through deep learning practices embedded throughout the district. So, what was the genesis of moving towards deep learning? We struck this Director's Principal Advisory Group over a year ago, and the number one issue after some deliberation that they identified was deficits with respect to student engagement. So, the search for strategies to tackle that issue led us to the doorstep of deep learning. So we've distributed these extensively throughout the district. Every principal has a copy of this particular book, and every trustee has been provided. This is not the Bible, this is not the panacea, this is not the great way forward for all of us. But it does offer a perspective and a common lexicon in which we can move the system forward. Why deep learning? And this is hard to hear for an educator. Research is showing that as the grade levels go up, students are less and less engaged. We also know that we're being told that schooling is less relevant for future job markets. And this is a quote that really hurts. No reason for majority of students to take conventional schooling seriously. This is coming from the research around Dr. Fullen and his team, as well as other educators. And what we're also experiencing, the student engagement piece is lacking, and we need to go deeper into deeper learning practices. So we know that students are facing a more challenging world. It's not about content and just regurgitating content anymore. The days of having a set piece of knowledge that we're just going to relay and impart and then have repeated back to us are gone. That according to OECD, the new dynamic for graduates, they're going to be paid for what they can do rather than what they just know. Now, that doesn't preclude the fact that we need a toolbox, a basic set of skills that every student has, particularly those that are accrued in the K-6 grades. What students are telling us, I recently met with a student leadership group in Grand Falls, Windsor at Exploits Valley High. And this is a cross-section of students from small schools, large schools, schools throughout Newfoundland and Labrador. And they told us what they think good teaching looks like. And that's an enthusiastic teacher who loves their subject, who wants to have genuine connections with students. And in that milieu, you get good student engagement. They told us that they want authentic learning. Had one student said, you know, I got a 98 in a subject, but I got that by just managing my way through the curriculum as opposed to really learning what the subject was supposed to be about. That's a pretty stark and hard to hear comment coming from a student. They know that they need to understand, not just memorize. There was a plea from a lot of them for more experiential learning related to the real world, more hands-on. And they felt that we as a system need to do a better job at preparing them for life after graduation. And they spoke about a system that culminates in a 2-hour public exam is not necessarily a good model of measuring what they know or what they can do. And they offered, and they wanted to talk about, these are just highlights, and they wanted to have more choice in their programming. So if we look at Fullen's work, these are the questions that he puts forward as being important. What's important to be learned? How is it fostered? Where does it happen? And how do we measure it? The last one is the hardest to achieve. How do we measure? Because right now we use conventional means producing a 2-digit marker or letter grade, what does that really capture? It captures what we know and what the knowledge base is, but does it capture the modern learning requirements around the 4 C's of critical thinking, communication, collaboration, critical thinking? And if we add in 2 more, and this is what deep learning is defined as, it's all of those 4 C's we've been talking about for many years, but also character. And when I say character, it also includes resiliency. So those students that are going to be prepared for life after high school, as well as citizenship, and not just citizenship in the local community, oh, that's important, but also global citizenship in terms of activism related to the environment, as an example. The one thing that we like, and this is a very quick covering of deep learning, the one thing that Fullen does really well is he builds good models. He gives us a common lexicon. So people can understand that if we vary our pedagogical practices, if we form partnerships in the community and broader, if we take our learning environments and extend them beyond the classroom, and if we leverage our digital assets, then we can get at the core of those 6 C's that are involved in deep learning. So one example to illustrate is Brilliant Labs. We're doing a lot of work with Brilliant Labs. So this is focused on the K to 6 right now, and we intend to broaden that into intermediate next year. There is a significant amount of investment from our own board and from the government in this. So it's a great partnership. We're creating makerspace labs. Now we're starting small. There are 2 that have been developed right now by Brilliant Labs, 3 more in the initial stages of development. And we also know that there's pieces of what Brilliant Labs are doing in every school. Almost every school is involved to some degree in coding or in some form of experiential learning. So this is not just exemplars from a few locations. New pedagogical practices, a lot of them involving coding, but it's not just coding. Brilliant Labs is focused on coding, and then leveraging those digital skills. One of our principals in the Director's Principal Advisory Group, Ryan Kelly, has embraced this completely and is moving forward with these deep learning practices and leveraging Brilliant Labs partnership. Another good example, and this is not necessarily Brilliant Labs, this is just something that a local initiative in Labrador, in Hopedale, where the community took the Google Expeditions platform and went out and documented their own community virtually. You can go online with the virtual reality devices, the headsets, and essentially explore Hopedale. And this was all developed by students. So you can imagine the multiple outcomes that are achieved from the curriculum by doing a project like this. It's connected to the real world. It leveraged multiple partnerships, such as with the Natsivit government, and used their digital equipment to do an absolutely fantastic project. And I'll just play another example here now. This is Sprucewood Academy. While I was out in Grand Falls, Windsor, we went to Sprucewood. I took advantage of being in the location and saw their setup. Now, again, this is, we got a teacher there, a learning resource teacher, who loves this stuff. We also have a principal who has been through the program at Memorial, the technology program, who understands and supports this initiative within our school. And this is just one example. Sorry, I'll go back there and make sure I get this played. Lights.
Our task at the LEGO wall and design board is to determine the proper order of the planets, find out how far apart they are, and their relative size to each other.
Using the Collaboration Center, our group members will share one common screen and together we will write dialogue to support our findings. Whether or not we could possibly exist and live comfortably in outer space.
After we found some flat rocks, we are going to add artistic flair to them by painting the planets on them. We need to paint complete sets of each planet in order to play our game.
To better our understanding, we developed games from books we read to test our friends' knowledge.
To support the findings on the LEGO wall, we 3D printed a model scale of the planetary system along with a rocket to give our audience a visual of what it would look like if we could actually hold it in our hand.
In order for us to make our rocks a hand-drawn game, we needed something to carry them and host them from view. Here we will create baggies, sew them together, and design them to support the game's theme. After we get our baggies sewed together, we will design them at the Itsy Bitsy table.
In our makerspace, we still encourage literature, whether it would be a book from the shelf or something online. This is where we find our million-dollar words and information.
In order to help our collaboration group, we want to reference temperatures here on Earth. Using microbits, we'll develop make code to find temperatures in our school and outside. They will become the benchmark for our report.
Using the Ozobots, we have the chance to code possible scales of revolution around the sun for each planet. The Ozobot track should again be relative to the Earth's orbit and timed accordingly.
Using our EV3 LEGO robotics, we are learning code to better understand the Mars Rover Challenge. Here it is cool to be wrong and challenged to make it better.
Our shared document will be teleprompted in our green room, and our reporters will either live telecast their findings or create a video that will be shared with others to document and report our findings.
So this is real. I just stumbled onto it when I was out in Grand Falls, Windsor, and there's a lot of similar programs taking place in a lot of our schools around the province. It won't look exactly like this everywhere. There'll be pieces of it that some do better than others, but this is the direction that we're moving in, and we feel that by doing this, by having this real-world experiential learning in which the kids are, you can see, thoroughly engaged, that we're going to get at where we need to be in terms of moving students forward and being able to be global citizens, fully articulate and capable of adapting to a world that's changing in multiple facets. And this is just one example. As I said, there are many different ways in which this is not quite replicated, but similar programs exist in many schools around the province. The challenge will be to build capacity, to build exemplars, and to have this pervasive in our system. But we have to start somewhere. So the characteristics of a classroom that's moving towards deep learning are the students asking the questions valued above the answers, varied models for learning, has to be a real-world application, must be collaborative, and the learning is authentic, and the assessment is as well. So, does this mean that everything we've been doing to this point is wrong? No. It's not about throwing out what we know works. It's about putting a different lens on things. And really, this is a kind of a dynamic that emphasizes that there are things that we want to discard in our system. There are things that we want to keep, we know work. Been tried and true practices for decades. That's the treasure chest. attracted to some shiny objects. Just because it's a automated or computer or modern or robotic device doesn't mean it's necessarily effective. And we have to encourage pushing out into that frontier of trying new things. So 5 learning conditions that impact how deep we go with deep learning, the diffusion of it. Clearly, visions and goals. We know we have the leadership, and we're building that leadership capacity. Some of that will also emanate from this body as a board of trustees, building those collaborative cultures and ultimately deepening the learning. Our challenge is the last bullet, new measures of assessment, because we are in a system that still expects that numerical grade or that letter grade, and that's fine. But we also have to build new ways of assessing what we're doing along the lines of those 6 components of deep learning. And your placemat, which you can roll up and take with you, is this particular slide, which pretty much captures the entire, and this is why we like Fullen's work. And again, it's not a panacea, but it does offer a way forward. And we want to extract what works for us in this environment, but we feel that we're making progress with our leadership. And by doing this, we'll increase student engagement and ultimately improve student achievement. So where do we go from here? Initially, after the Directors Principal Advisory Group pointed the way towards deep learning, we met with all the headquarters and regional staff in August. It formed, and some of you participated in our leadership sessions in our regions in September. We've sent a number of district and members of the Principal Advisory Group to deep learning seminar in Anglophone East in New Brunswick. I collaborated with the director there. I met him at a conference last year, and he graciously opened up attendance for Newfoundland and Labrador participants at this program in New Brunswick. We know that we have to capture exemplars like the one in Sprucewood and develop those and support them. And we'll be meeting soon with the Educational Foundation Group, and one of the things we're going to propose is that we take the awards and grants for innovation, which we indicated that we were going to revisit, and repurpose that towards providing funding to each of our directors of schools to select a school that they want to leverage with funding to support deep learning initiatives, and then have them report back on progress later this year and use that as an exemplar that we can replicate in other schools. And we've established a district working group on this, starting with one of the first things they did was had a book club developed amongst these principals to study the issue of deep learning. We're excited by this. It provides us with a vehicle to move forward within the system we have, and we're getting great uptake and great enthusiasm in the system. In some ways, and I'll confess here, that we are following the lead of some of our innovative teachers. Some of our innovative teachers have already been doing this. They didn't ask permission, they just went ahead and did it without us. So in some ways, we're leading by following their example. Thank you. Mr. Chair, subject to your questions, that's the director's report.
Thank you, Tony. Any questions for the director in his report?
Tony?
Jennifer?
Great report. I applaud initiatives that find new ways. We all agree that we have to adapt to changing times. You and I have had this discussion in the past about evaluation, and I'm wondering 2 things. Is there a model that we're watching to see what the long-term outcomes are? And secondly, as we move away from traditional ways of assessment and things like that, have we ourselves considered an evaluation model that is both short-term and long-term? Because if we look at the moving away from grades as being the critical piece, and in some ways I'm sure it is, but then those kids also have to get into post-secondary and scholarships and things like that.
Understood, and we could talk about this all day.
Yeah.
And I totally agree. And forgive me if I led you with the impression that we're moving away from grades. We're still operating in that milieu. That's still the setup that we have, and that's still our mandate to deliver. So the reporting periods are the same, and you will get the same reporting grades or letter grades, whatever time of year it is, whatever, depending on the grade level. But what the research Fuller and his group are arguing and is that by doing these deep learning initiatives, you also get better at the conventional testing. That there's no, that at the end of the day, those students that are interactive, that are engaged, and learning these multiple outcomes. If you look at that Sprucewood example, you can see literacy, you can see numeracy, creative thinking. All of those things will come together to improve performance on our conventional testing as well. Now, you're right, we need metrics on that. One of the early metrics, if we're talking about student engagement, is a very simple metric, and that's, does it affect attendance? Are we improving attendance? The other one is school climate and culture surveys, the performance management framework, which asks students questions about how they feel about their school. Are they engaged? Do their teachers care? Those type of things will also tell us. But I acknowledge as well the challenge in focusing on trying to assess something like citizenship. What does that look like? And how do we know that we're actually achieving those aims? That's still a challenge. So we're starting, we're leaning into this. We haven't arrived at the end, and I'm not pretending that Michael Fuller and his group have solved education. What it does do is offer us a way forward to improve engagement practices in the school. I don't know if that answers the question, Jennifer.
The new piece this year with removing the midterm exams in 48 participating schools, is that a part of this as well?
That's a separate initiative. Now, conceivably, if you've taken 2 weeks out of the year where we're focused on doing a midterm, you now have more time to do other things differently. And the other piece, too, that I tried to impart to teachers and principals who are leading this is, just because you do it this way doesn't mean that you have to, that's okay. Was sure it was you or your phone, Tom.
I can't whistle like that.
Sorry, I lost my train there. If you're going to cover, and I'm not sure that's the right term, cover the curriculum using deep learning techniques, doesn't mean you now go back and do it your conventional way, because that's not what we're about. We're about changing the dynamic so that because you do it this way, you've now achieved those learning outcomes differently. You don't have to go back and do it again. And if you do it in an integrated way, a more efficient way, students will be better engaged, derive more out of it because they're actively involved, and this will ultimately improve where we are with student achievement. Thanks.
Other questions for the director? Hayward?
It's not really a question, but I just want to say, Tony, thank you, because sometimes when we sit around this table, we may appear as a, dare I say it, a dysfunctional group. But when I see and listen to what you're saying and the kinds of things that you're trying to make happen in our schools, and some of the things indeed that are happening in our schools, like I get excited. And I've often said that we do the education part really, really well. I'm not so sure about the finance part, and I'll plead my own ignorance because I don't come from a finance background, and I don't pretend to be a guru in the area of finance. But, you know, personally, I'm about education. I'm about children. I'm about teaching. I'm about learning. And when I see the kinds of things you're talking about, it excites me to go away and say, I can sleep well at night. I think we're doing a very, very good job of changing the way our children learn and how we teach them. And when you are presenting to us there, I'm wanting more of it. No disrespect to Terry, but when Terry's talking about auditing and finance, I want less of it. And that's not to disrespect you, but because I'm really, the Auditor General may slap me on the wrist because I'm not as versed in that part of our organization. And maybe I'm not as interested in it, because whether or not we have good finance, it may not have very little to do with the learning. And I'm very much concerned about our learning, our children's learning, our young people, and what they're doing in our classrooms, and to hope that we're changing the way we do things. And when I listen to you and I see this, I'm excited, and I'm validated in a sense that, you know, we still have the classroom as the forefront of what we do. And yes, we had to deal with the finance, but education continues, and the job we do in our classrooms continues. So thank you, Tony, very much.
Thank you. Trustee Blake.
Further questions for the director? Seeing none, thank you, Tony. To the agenda, we are now going to adjourn to close. We are running into somewhat of a time problem. It's 5 after 4, and we're due to close at 4:30. I would suggest we go to close and get that done, unless there's dramatic objection to it. Very well. Do I detect support for that couple of minutes? Okay, very well. Need a motion to go into close, so someone will so move. Lester, John, those in favor, aye. So we're in closed session, although we're walking around.